Some monsters are born, others are forged in the fires of loss, betrayal, and manipulation. General Grievous was a being who walked both paths, a warrior transformed into a weapon, a protector twisted into a destroyer. His story begins not with the wheezing cyborg commander who terrorized the Jedi Order, but with a young warrior on a distant world, fighting to save his people from extinction. The tale of General Grievous spans from the remote reaches of wild space to the very heart of the Galactic Republic. It encompasses love and loss, honor and corruption, transformation and tragedy. Long before he collected lightsabers as trophies and commanded legions of battle droids, he was simply Kimayan Jai Shilal, a son of Kalee, defender of the Kaleesh people. Understanding who he was illuminates the horror of what he became, the red sands of Kalee. In the unexplored regions beyond the Republic's reach, where civilizations rose and fell without notice from the galactic powers, there existed a harsh world called Kalee. The planet's surface was dominated by arid deserts and rocky badlands, punctuated by deep jungles and treacherous seas. Life on Kalee had never been easy, and perhaps that explained why its dominant species, the Kaleesh, had evolved into one of the most formidable warrior cultures in the galaxy. The Kaleesh were reptilian humanoids with distinctive red and orange skin, elongated skulls, and fierce yellow eyes that seemed to burn with inner fire. Their faces were characterized by prominent tusks that curved upward from their lower jaws, giving them a naturally intimidating appearance. But it was not their physical features that made them fearsome. It was their culture, their beliefs, and their dedication to the art of war. Kaleesh society revolved around tribal structures led by powerful warlords. These warlords earned their positions through proven strength and tactical brilliance in battle. War was not merely a necessity for the Kaleesh, but something approaching a sacred practice, a way to honor the gods and prove one's worth to the ancestors. They believed that those who performed great deeds in life would ascend to become gods in death, joining the pantheon of ancestor spirits who watched over their descendants. The spiritual heart of Kaleesh culture was centered around burial practices and ancestor worship. Temples devoted to the gods dotted the landscape, with the holiest site being Shrupak, a massive complex where the greatest heroes were entombed. Pilgrims would journey across treacherous terrain to reach Abbas Mi, a towering monolith of stone rising from the Genoa Sea, where they believed the gods themselves had ascended to the heavens. These pilgrimages were dangerous, often fatal, but the Kaleesh saw this as fitting. Only through struggle could one approach divinity. Into this world of warriors and gods, Kimayan Jai Shilal was born. His family belonged to the Lig tribe, one of many that comprised Kaleesh civilization. Like most Kaleesh males, his father was a warrior who had taken multiple wives and fathered many children, ensuring the continuation of their bloodline. Young Kimayan grew up surrounded by tales of legendary battles, of warriors who had achieved such greatness that they now sat among the gods. But these were not merely stories told around fires for entertainment. They were living history, lessons in tactics and courage that every young Kaleesh was expected to absorb and emulate. From his earliest years, Kimayan was trained in the ways of war. The Kaleesh understood that survival on their harsh world and against external threats required every member of society to be capable of defending themselves and their tribe. The young Kaleesh showed remarkable aptitude from the beginning. He possessed a strategic mind that could analyze battlefield situations with unusual clarity, seeing patterns and possibilities that eluded others. His reflexes were lightning quick, his movements precise. But beyond natural talent, Kimaan demonstrated an almost obsessive dedication to perfecting his skills. While other children played, he practiced. While they rested, he studied the tactics of legendary warlords. What truly set Kimaan apart, however, was his driving motivation. He did not seek glory for its own sake or train merely to achieve status. His determination came from witnessing something far more primal and powerful than ambition. He had seen his people suffer. The Huk invasion, the technologically superior Yamari, better known by their Kaleesh name Huk, which translated roughly to soulless bug, had long been a threat to the Kaleesh way of life. These insectoid beings came from the neighboring planet of Huk in the same star system, and they possessed something the Kaleesh lacked: advanced technology and weapons far beyond what the tribal warriors of Kalee could produce. The Huk had been conducting raids on Kalee for generations, but these escalated into full-scale invasion when Kimaan was still a child. The Yamari did not merely seek to conquer territory. They enslaved the Kaleesh people they captured, viewing the reptilian warriors as little more than animals to be exploited for labor. Villages were burned, families torn apart, and proud warriors shackled and dragged away to work in Yamari colonies. Young Kimaan witnessed atrocities that would have broken most beings. He saw his neighbors killed in raids, watched as Yamari warriors with their superior weapons cut down Kaleesh defenders who wielded primitive blades and slug throwers. The disparity in firepower was devastating. Where a Kaleesh warrior might need to land a perfect shot with a slug thrower rifle, the Huk could spray automatic fire that shredded entire defensive lines. The psychological toll on the Kaleesh people was immense. They were warriors, bred for combat across countless generations, yet they were being systematically defeated by an enemy they despised. The Huk showed no respect for Kaleesh burial traditions, no acknowledgement of the warrior culture they were destroying. To the insectoid invaders, the Kaleesh were simply obstacles to be removed or resources to be exploited. Kimaan's father, seeing the rage and grief building in his young son, made a decision. Rather than let these emotions consume the boy, he would channel them into purpose. He began teaching Kimaan to use a slug thrower rifle, one of the few advanced weapons the Kaleesh possessed in significant numbers. These rifles, imported from off-world traders or scavenged from fallen enemies, represented the Kaleesh's best chance at fighting back against Huk technology. The training was intense and began far earlier than traditional warrior instruction. Kimaan's father drilled him relentlessly in marksmanship, teaching him to calculate distance and wind, to control his breathing, to squeeze the trigger with perfect smoothness. But he also taught his son something more important than mechanical skill. He taught him patience. A slug thrower required precision. Unlike the spray and pray tactics of automatic weapons, a rifleman needed to make each shot count. This suited young Kimaan's analytical mind perfectly. He approached shooting as a form of mathematics, calculating trajectories and timing with the same intensity he applied to studying battle tactics. Every variable mattered, every adjustment brought him closer to perfection. By the time Kimaan reached 8 years old an age when most children were still learning basic combat forms, he had already achieved something remarkable. He had killed 40 Yamri invaders, 40 confirmed kills, each one a precisely placed shot that had dropped an enemy threatening his people. The number was astonishing for a child, but what made it truly exceptional was the efficiency. Kumail never wasted ammunition. Every bullet he fired seemed to find its target. Word of the child sniper spread among the Kaleesh tribes. Here was a sign, many whispered, that the gods had not abandoned them. In their darkest hour, when the hook seemed poised to crush Kaleesh civilization entirely, a warrior had emerged who could strike back with deadly accuracy. Elders who visited the Lig tribe to verify the stories came away convinced that young Kumail Jai Shilal was destined for greatness. The boy accepted these declarations with a focus that unnerved some adults. He did not boast of his kills or revel in the attention. Instead, he seemed to view each Yamri death simply as a problem solved, a number reduced from a total of enemies threatening his world. His cold calculation in combat contrasted sharply with his behavior among his family, where he showed warmth and care. It was as if he could compartmentalize his fury, saving it entirely for the battlefield. As Kumail grew older and more skilled, he began to think beyond individual kills. He studied the patterns of Huk attacks, analyzed their strategies, and started to understand their weaknesses. The Yamri relied heavily on their technological superiority, which made them predictable. They didn't expect sophisticated tactics from what they viewed as primitive tribal warriors. This arrogance, Kumail realized, was something that could be exploited. By his teenage years, Kumail was no longer just a sniper. He had become a tactical thinker, a strategist who could coordinate groups of warriors to maximum effect. Other young Kaleesh gravitated toward him, drawn by his reputation and his evident brilliance in battle. He began to forge the network of warriors that would one day become his personal army. But Kumail understood something crucial. The Kaleesh needed more than just good tactics and brave warriors. They needed weapons that could match Huk firepower, and they needed leaders who could unite the fractious tribes into a cohesive fighting force. Most importantly, they needed a symbol, a figure who could inspire the Kaleesh to believe they could win a war that had seemed unwinnable for so long. He set about becoming that symbol. The warrior's education. As Kumail approached his 20th year, his reputation as a warrior had grown considerably. He had hundreds of confirmed kills against the Huk, and his tactical innovations had saved countless Kaleesh lives. But he knew that marksmanship alone would not be enough. The Huk were numerous, and their technology continued to advance. If the Kaleesh were to have any hope of victory, their warriors would need to master multiple combat forms. Traditional Kaleesh warfare involved close-quarters combat with bladed weapons, something their culture had perfected over centuries. The problem was that Huk weaponry made closing the distance difficult. Their automatic rifles could cut down charging warriors before they got within striking range. Kumail began to study how successful raids on Huk positions had been accomplished, looking for patterns he could replicate. What he discovered was that the most successful Kaleesh warriors were those who combined ranged and melee capabilities, who could snipe from distance but also excel in close combat when the opportunity arose. This required mastering weapons beyond the slug-thrower rifle. It required learning the blade. It was during this period that Kumayan met someone who would change his life forever. Her name was Ronderu Lij Kumar, and she was already famous among the Kaleesh as a master swordswoman. Where Kumayan had specialized in long-range precision, Ronderu had devoted herself to the ancient Kaleesh art of blade work. She could wield a sword with breathtaking grace and devastating effect, cutting through multiple opponents in fluid sequences that seemed more like dance than combat. Ronderu came from a different tribe than Kumayan, but the Hook War had begun breaking down traditional tribal divisions. Necessity had forced the Kaleesh to cooperate more fully than ever before in their history. When Ronderu heard of the brilliant young sniper who was revolutionizing Kaleesh tactics, she sought him out, curious to meet this warrior whose reputation rivaled her own. Their first meeting occurred at a council of war, where various tribal leaders and prominent warriors had gathered to plan a major offensive against Hook positions. Kumayan was presenting his analysis of enemy defenses when Ronderu entered the tent. She wore the traditional bone mask of Kaleesh warriors, specifically a muumuu skull that covered the lower half of her face, marking her as a veteran of many battles. Kumayan found himself momentarily distracted, not by Ronderu's appearance, but by the way she moved. Even in the simple act of walking across the tent, he could see the controlled grace of a master combatant, every motion economical and balanced. When she spoke to challenge one of his tactical points, her voice carried the confidence of someone who had survived countless battles and emerged victorious. The debate that followed was intense. Ronderu questioned whether Kumayan's plan relied too heavily on ranged superiority, arguing that the Kaleesh's true strength lay in close combat, where their ferocity and skill could overwhelm even technologically superior foes. Kumayan countered that getting to close range against Hook automatic weapons required sacrificing too many warriors. They needed to weaken enemy positions first before committing to charges. What could have become a contentious argument instead evolved into a fascinating exchange of ideas. Both warriors recognized in the other a kindred spirit, someone who approached combat with the same analytical intensity they themselves brought to battle. By the end of the council, they had integrated their perspectives into a hybrid strategy that utilized both long-range precision fire and close-quarters assault. The plan worked brilliantly. Command snipers eliminated key Huck officers and weapons emplacements, creating gaps in their defenses. Then, Ronderu led the charge with her sword-wielding warriors, exploiting those gaps to devastating effect. The Huck position fell with surprisingly few Kaleesh casualties, and the victory energized Kaleesh forces across the planet. In the aftermath of the battle, Kumayan approached Ronderu with a proposition. He needed to learn sword work to complement his ranged skills. She was the greatest blade master among the Kaleesh. Would she teach him? In return, he would teach her advanced marksmanship with the slug thrower, expanding her combat capabilities. Ronderu agreed, though she warned him that mastering the blade required more than technical skill. It required understanding the philosophy behind Kaleesh sword work, which emphasized flowing from one technique to another, adapting to each opponent's style while maintaining constant offensive pressure. The blade was an extension of the warrior's will, and mastering it meant mastering oneself. The training was grueling. Ronderu was a demanding instructor who accepted nothing less than perfection. She would have Kumayan practiced the same sequence of cuts hundreds of times till the movements became instinctive. She taught him footwork, distance management, how to read an opponent's intentions from subtle body language. Most importantly, she taught him that combat was not about individual techniques, but about the space between them, the transitions where true mastery revealed itself. Kalee proved to be an exceptional student. His analytical mind, which served him so well in long-range combat, helped him break down sword work into component parts he could study and optimize. But Ronderu pushed him to move beyond analysis, to let the techniques flow without conscious thought. True mastery came when the mind stopped calculating and the body simply knew what to do. In return, Kalee taught Ronderu everything he had learned about marksmanship. She took to it with surprising aptitude, though she never developed quite the same obsessive precision that characterized Kalee's shooting. What she gained was something equally valuable: the ability to engage enemies at range before they could respond. Combined with her blade mastery, she became even more dangerous than before. As they trained together over the following months, something deeper than mutual respect began to develop. They were both warriors who had dedicated their lives to defending their people, both carrying the weight of every Kaleesh who had fallen to hook aggression. In each other, they found someone who understood the burden, someone who shared the same driving purpose. They began fighting together in battles, coordinating their attacks with an almost telepathic precision. Kalee would eliminate distant threats while Ronderu carved through enemies at close range. When either found themselves in trouble, the other was there, covering their weakness. They saved each other's lives so many times that keeping count became meaningless. The bond between them grew into something the Kaleesh called kolk pravis, a word that didn't translate neatly into basic, but encompassed concepts of comradeship, partnership, and a bond forged through shared battle. For Kalee and Ronderu, kolk pravis deepened into love, though it was a love expressed through action rather than words. Every battle they survived together strengthened their connection. Other warriors began to notice the dynamic between them. Some formed similar partnerships, trying to replicate the success of the famous sniper and the legendary swordswoman. A new military formation emerged among the Kaleesh, with ranged specialists and close combat experts operating in coordinated teams. The tactic proved devastatingly effective against Huk forces. Kalee had inherited his father's Mumu skull mask when the older warrior fell in battle against a Huk raiding party. The mask had belonged to the family for generations, passed from father to son, each warrior adding their own scratches and battle damage to its surface. Kalee wore it with pride, knowing he carried his father's legacy and the spirits of all his ancestors into every fight. Ronderu wore her own ancestral mask, and together they became instantly recognizable on the battlefield. Stories spread of the two masked warriors who seemed unstoppable, who had never been defeated in combat, who brought victory wherever they fought. The Kaleesh began to whisper that they might be favored by the gods, chosen to lead their people to ultimate victory over the Huk. By the time Kalee reached 22 years of age, he had achieved what few Kaleesh had ever accomplished. He was viewed as a demigod by his people, someone whose deeds had elevated him beyond normal mortality. Temples across Kalee featured shrines dedicated to him, where warriors would pray for a fraction of his skill before going into battle. Ronderu had achieved similar status, her reputation as a blade master becoming legendary across Kaleesh society. But neither of them sought worship or divine status. They saw themselves as servants of their people, instruments of Kaleesh survival. Every Huk they killed brought their civilization one step closer to freedom. Every battle they won saved Kaleesh lives and drove the invaders back toward their own world. This was their purpose, and they pursued it with single-minded intensity. The relationship between Kimayan and Ronderu became something beautiful in its own way, though it was a beauty forged in violence. They had returned from battles covered in Huk blood, exhausted and wounded, and find comfort in each other's presence. They never spoke of a future beyond the war, never made plans for what might come after victory. The war was everything. The war was eternal. In those rare quiet moments between battles, Kimayan sometimes wondered what kind of life he might have lived if the Huk had never invaded. Would he have been a farmer, or perhaps a scholar studying the tactical histories his mind so loved to analyze? Would he and Ronderu have met under different circumstances, perhaps finding each other at one of the great festivals that marked the Kaleesh calendar? Such speculation was pointless, he knew. The war defined him. It had shaped every aspect of his existence from childhood forward. He was a warrior because his people needed warriors. He was a killer because his people needed killers. And he had found love on the battlefield because that was where he had spent his entire life. Together, Kimayan Jai Shilal and Ronderu Lij Kumar represented the very best of Kaleesh warrior culture. They embodied the ideals their people held most sacred: courage, skill, dedication to the tribe, and the willingness to sacrifice everything in defense of their civilization. They had become symbols of hope, proof that even against superior technology and numbers, Kaleesh determination could prevail. What neither of them could have known as they stood at the height of their power and fame was how quickly everything could change, how suddenly hope could transform into horror, how love could give way to loss so profound it would reshape a soul. The foundation of Kimayan's entire existence was about to shatter, setting him on a path that would eventually lead to his transformation into something his people could never have imagined. The Huk War was about to teach Kimayan Jai Shilal a lesson that would haunt him for the rest of his life, that even demigods could lose everything. The price of war. As the war entered its third decade, the tide had slowly begun to turn in favor of the Kaleesh. The innovations in tactics introduced by Kimayan and adopted across the tribal warriors had started yielding consistent victories. Huk positions that had seemed impregnable fell to coordinated assaults. Supply lines were cut. Isolated Yamrik garrisons found themselves besieged by Kaleesh forces that fought with renewed vigor and confidence. Kimayan had by this time gathered around him an elite group of warriors known as the Izvoshra. These 8 individuals represented the finest fighters from different tribes, handpicked by Kimayan himself for their exceptional skills. Each Izvoshra member specialized in different aspects of combat, creating a versatile force capable of handling any battlefield situation. They served as Kimayan's bodyguards, his special forces unit, and his closest advisors. Together with Ronderu, Kimayan led the Izvoshra in increasingly daring raids against Huk positions. They became legendary for their ability to strike deep into enemy territory, accomplish seemingly impossible objectives, and extract themselves before Yamri forces could organize an effective response. The Izvoshra moved like shadows, appearing where they were least expected and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. The Hook had begun to fear these raids in particular. Traditional Kaleesh assaults, while effective, followed patterns the Yamri could predict and prepare for. But Kimain's operations were unpredictable, creative, and devastatingly effective. He studied each target meticulously, identifying weaknesses in defenses and timing attacks for maximum psychological impact. One particularly successful operation saw the Izvoshra infiltrate a major Hook command center and eliminate several high-ranking military leaders in a single night. The Yamri had believed the facility to be impossible to penetrate, protected by layers of security and automated defenses. But Kimayan had discovered that the Hook relied too heavily on their technology, assuming that electronic security systems made physical guards unnecessary in certain areas. The Izvoshra had exploited this weakness, using captured Hook access codes and disguises to walk through the front entrance. Once inside, they moved through the facility with lethal efficiency, killing sentries silently and sabotaging communication systems. By the time the Hook realized they were under attack, the Izvoshra had already accomplished their mission and were extracting through a previously mapped escape route. The operation sent shockwaves through Hook military command. If their most secure facilities could be penetrated so easily, nowhere was safe. Paranoia spread among Yamri officers, and security protocols became so stringent that they actually hampered military effectiveness. Kumain had succeeded in making the enemy fear their own shadows. These victories brought the Kaleesh people together as never before. Ancient tribal rivalries were set aside in the face of their common enemy and their shared hero. Kimain found himself not just a military leader, but a symbol around which Kaleesh civilization was coalescing. Chiefs from distant regions traveled to meet with him, pledging their warriors to his command. With each success, Kimain's fame grew. Temples dedicated shrines to him. Songs were composed celebrating his victories. Young Kaleesh warriors emulated his tactics and fighting style. He had achieved a status among his people that transcended normal fame. He had become mythic, but Kimain himself remained focused on the tactical reality. Yes, they were winning battles. Yes, Huk forces were being pushed back, but the enemy still held significant territory on Kalee and maintained control of their home world of Huk. The war was far from over, and complacency would undo all their hard-won gains. Ronderu shared his concerns. She had noticed a dangerous tendency among some Kaleesh warriors to become overconfident, to charge into battle without proper preparation because they believed the gods would grant them victory. She and Kimayan worked to counter this, emphasizing that their success came from discipline and strategy, not divine intervention. Every battle still required careful planning and execution. During this period, Kimayan and Ronderu made a private vow to each other. They would fight together until the Huk were driven not just from Kalee, but from their own home world as well. They would see the Yamri broken completely, unable to ever threaten the Kaleesh people again. Only when that goal was achieved would they allow themselves to rest, to perhaps build the peaceful life together that existed only in fleeting dreams. The beaches of Kalee's southern continent became the site of the war's most intense battles. These broad stretches of sand represented strategically crucial landing sites that the Hook used to reinforce their positions on Kalee. If the Kaleesh could deny the enemy these beachheads, they could isolate and eliminate Hook forces already on the planet while preventing new invaders from arriving. Kaleesh devised an ambitious plan to assault the beaches in force, breaking Hook control and establishing Kaleesh defensive positions that could hold against counterattacks. It would require coordinating multiple tribal forces, timing the attack to coincide with unfavorable tides that would make Hook naval reinforcement difficult, and accepting significant casualties in the initial assault. Ronderu would lead the primary strike force, her sword-wielding warriors charging the fortified Hook positions once Kaleesh's snipers had eliminated key defensive emplacements. The Izvoshra would be split, half going with Ronderu to serve as her personal guard, half remaining with Kaleesh to protect him and coordinate the ranged forces. The battle, when it came, was chaos incarnate. The Hook had reinforced the beaches more heavily than intelligence had suggested, and they fought with desperate ferocity. They recognized that losing the beachheads would effectively end their presence on Kalee, and they were determined not to let that happen. Kaleesh's snipers performed brilliantly, eliminating sentries and picking off officers with mechanical precision. But there were too many targets, and the Hook had learned to operate with redundant command structures. Destroying one command post meant another simply took over, maintaining the enemy's organized resistance. Still, the barrage created enough confusion for Ronderu to lead her warriors forward. They crashed into Hook defensive lines like a wave breaking against rocks, overwhelming the first fortifications through sheer ferocity and skill. Ronderu herself was a whirlwind of death, her sword finding every gap in Hook armor, every weakness in their defenses. The battle spread across miles of coastline, breaking into hundreds of individual skirmishes. In the confusion, Kaleesh lost direct line of sight to Ronderu's position. He could see the overall flow of the battle from his vantage point, could see that his forces were winning despite heavy casualties, but he couldn't pinpoint her exact location. He pressed forward with his own contingent of the Izvoshra, trying to get to a better observation position. His warriors formed a protective cordon around him, knowing that Kaleesh's tactical genius was worth more to the Kaleesh cause than any individual fighter. They pushed through pockets of Hook resistance, leaving devastation in their wake. It was during this advance that something went wrong in the sector where Ronderu was fighting. Kaleesh never learned the exact sequence of events, whether Ronderu had pushed too far ahead of her supporting warriors or whether a Hook counterattack had isolated her from her guard. What he learned later was only the outcome. In the heat of combat, separated from her bodyguards by the churning melee, Ronderu found herself surrounded by Yamri warriors wielding their barbed cutting implements. These weapons, designed for slicing through thick vegetation on their home world, could tear through flesh with horrifying efficiency. Ronderu fought with every ounce of her legendary skill, her blade singing through the air as she cut down Hook attackers. But there were too many. The barbed shears found her, once, twice, multiple times. She fell, By the time the Isvoshra fought through to her position, it was too late. They drove away the Hook warriors and secured the area, but Rondaru Lij Kumar was gone. Her body, torn and broken by the enemy's weapons, had been swept away by the tide. The ocean claimed her, denying the Kaleesh even the dignity of properly burying their fallen champion. News of her death reached Kimayan as the battle was ending. A Kaleesh victory, secured at great cost, but victory nonetheless. The beaches were theirs. The Hook would never again use them to reinforce their positions on Kalee. By any military standard, the operation had been a success. Kimayan Jai Shilal felt none of the triumph that should have accompanied such a victory. He felt only a void opening within him, a darkness that threatened to swallow everything. Rondaru was gone, his partner, his equal, the one being in the galaxy who truly understood him, gone. He stood on the blood-stained sand as victory celebrations erupted around him and felt nothing. The Isvoshra gathered around their commander, sharing his grief, but there were no words that could reach him in that moment. The greatest tactical mind among the Kaleesh, the warrior whose strategies had brought them so close to ultimate victory, was simply a man who had lost someone irreplaceable. The rest of the battle became a blur. Kimayan functioned mechanically, issuing orders and organizing the consolidation of their gains. But it was all automatic. His mind was elsewhere, replaying every moment he and Rondaru had shared, searching for something he could have done differently. As night fell, and the wounded were tended, and the dead were honored, Kimayan stood alone at the water's edge. Somewhere beneath those waves, Rondaru's body drifted with the currents. She would never receive the proper burial rituals. She would never be entombed at Shrupak with full honors. The ocean had stolen even that final dignity. The traditions of the Kaleesh said that warriors who performed great deeds would become gods in death. Kimayan had no doubt that Rondaru had earned that ascension, but the thought brought him no comfort. What good were gods who did nothing to protect the mortals who worshipped them? What good was divine status when it came too late to save a life? Something shifted in Kimayan in those dark hours. The grief that filled him began to transform, curdling into something harder and colder. He realized with sudden clarity that he would never escape this pain. It would never fade. Rondaru's absence would be a wound that could never heal, an emptiness that would remain with him always. And so he made a decision. He would not fight this grief. He would not try to move past it or overcome it. Instead, he would embrace it. He would make it the core of his being, the driving force behind everything he did. He would grieve for Rondaru for the rest of his life, and that grief would fuel his war against the Hook. With renewed fury, he would become grief incarnate. He would become Grievous. After the battle on the beaches, Kimayan Jai Shilal disappeared. His warriors searched for him through the night and into the following day, concerned that their leader had been wounded or captured. The Isvoshra combed the battlefield and the surrounding territory, but found no trace of their commander. He had gone to seek answers from the gods themselves. Kimayan had taken a small boat and set out across the treacherous waters of the Genoa Sea, navigating by starlight toward the sacred monolith of Abesmi. The journey was considered one of the most perilous pilgrimages a Kaleesh could undertake. The waters between the mainland and the rocky island where Abesmi stood were notoriously dangerous, filled with unpredictable currents and predatory sea creatures that had claimed countless pilgrims over the centuries. But Kumail was beyond caring about physical danger. His body moved through the motions of navigation and survival mechanically, while his mind remained locked on a single, consuming question. Why? Why had the gods allowed Ronderu to fall? She had been everything the Kaleesh honored in a warrior, brave, skilled, dedicated to her people. If anyone deserved divine protection, it was her. The voyage took him 2 days. When he finally reached the base of Abysme, he was exhausted, dehydrated, and half-mad with grief. The monolith rose before him, a pillar of dark stone that stretched toward the sky, worn smooth by millennia of wind and water. According to legend, this was where the greatest Kaleesh heroes had ascended to godhood, where the line between mortal and divine grew thin enough to cross. Kumail dragged himself onto the rocky shore and began to climb. The ascent was treacherous, requiring him to find handholds in the weathered stone and pull himself upward despite his depleted strength. More than once, he nearly fell, saved only by reflexes honed through years of combat. But he pressed on, driven by a desperate need to reach the summit, to get as close to the realm of the gods as physically possible. When he finally reached the top of Abysme, Kumail collapsed onto the stone surface. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and gold that reminded him painfully of Ronderu's coloring. He lay there for a time, gathering what remained of his strength before pushing himself up to his knees. And then he began to pray. The words poured out of him in a torrent, a raw outpouring of anguish and rage and desperate pleading. He begged the gods to return Ronderu to him, to undo her death, to perform the miracle that would restore meaning to his existence. He promised anything they asked in return, every victory, every future achievement, his own life if necessary. Just bring her back. Just let him see her one more time. The gods remained silent. Kumail's prayers turned to shouts, his voice echoing across the empty waters. He raged at the gods who accepted worship from the Kaleesh people but did nothing to protect them. What good was ascension to divinity if the gods were powerless to help those who remained behind? What kind of pantheon allowed heroes to fall while cowards lived? Still, no answer came. As the night deepened and stars filled the sky above, Kumail's fury exhausted itself. His shouts faded to whispers, then to silence. He remained kneeling on that windswept stone, looking up at the uncaring stars, and finally accepted the truth he had been avoiding. Ronderu was gone. No prayer would bring her back. The gods, if they existed at all, did not intervene to save mortals from the consequences of war. The dead remained dead, and the living were left to carry on alone. But Kumail realized something else in that moment of clarity. He had said he would grieve for Ronderu for the rest of his life, and he meant it. But that grief would not paralyze him. Instead, it would focus him with laser precision on a single purpose. He would continue the war they had fought together. He would drive the hook not just from Kalee, but from their own world. He would see the Yamri civilization broken completely, and he would do it in Ronderu's name. When Kumail Jai Shilal descended from Abysme and returned to his warriors, he was changed. The young commander, who had led through tactical brilliance tempered with humanity, was gone. In his place stood someone harder, colder, more ruthless. He adopted a new name to mark this transformation, one that would remind him and everyone else of what drove him. he would be called Grievous. The tide turns. The warrior who returned from his pilgrimage threw himself into the war with redoubled intensity. Grievous reorganized the Kaleesh military structure, eliminating inefficiencies and implementing new training protocols that transformed ordinary warriors into highly effective fighting units. He developed revolutionary tactics that exploited every weakness in Hook military doctrine. But what truly set this new phase of the war apart was Grievous's absolute ruthlessness. Previously, Chi-Man had fought with a kind of clinical precision, eliminating enemies efficiently but without particular cruelty. Grievous abandoned such restraint. He wanted the Huk to suffer. He wanted them to experience the same agony they had inflicted on the Kaleesh people. Prisoners were no longer taken. Wounded Yamri were left to die slowly rather than receiving quick deaths. Huk supply lines were not merely cut, but destroyed so thoroughly that even retreat became impossible. Grievous introduced tactics designed specifically to maximize Huk casualties and psychological trauma. He wanted the invaders to know true fear. The Kaleesh forces responded to their leader's transformation with enthusiasm. Many of them had lost loved ones to Huk aggression and welcomed the opportunity for vengeance. The war took on a new character, becoming less about strategic objectives and more about the systematic destruction of an enemy civilization. Under Grievous's command, the Kaleesh achieved victories that had seemed impossible just months earlier. Major Huk strongholds fell one after another. The invaders were pushed back, their positions becoming increasingly untenable. For the first time in the long decades of conflict, it became clear that the Kaleesh would not merely survive, but would win decisively. The turning point came when Grievous led a massive assault on Huk itself. The Yamri homeworld had seemed untouchable, protected by advanced orbital defenses and a navy that had dominated space around the system for generations. But Grievous had studied their patterns meticulously and discovered that their confidence made them predictable. Using a combination of captured Huk vessels and Kaleesh ingenuity, Grievous's forces penetrated the orbital defenses and established beachheads on Huk itself. The fighting that followed was among the most brutal of the entire war. The Yamri fought desperately to defend their home world, but Kaleesh fury was overwhelming. City after city fell to Grievous's advancing armies. The Kaleesh showed no mercy, repaying decades of suffering with interest. Huk industry was dismantled, their military infrastructure destroyed, their ability to project power shattered. Within months, the species that had once seemed poised to exterminate the Kaleesh found itself on the brink of extinction. Grievous achieved what had seemed impossible. He had not merely defended his people, but had conquered their conquerors. The Huk worlds were now under Kaleesh control, their surviving population subjugated, their military might broken forever. It was a victory of staggering magnitude. The Kaleesh people celebrated their champion. Grievous was hailed as the greatest warlord in their history, the hero who had saved their civilization from extinction and delivered their enemies into their hands. Shrines dedicated to him multiplied across Kalee. His name was spoken with the same reverence previously reserved for the ancient gods. But Grievous himself felt no satisfaction. The victories were ashes in his mouth. Yes, he had defeated the Huk. Yes, his people were safe. But Ronderu was still gone. All his triumphs meant nothing without her there to share them. the emptiness inside him remained unchanged. Moreover, the conquest of Hook had revealed a disturbing truth. Word of the conflict had reached the Galactic Republic, and the Republic, in its infinite bureaucratic wisdom, had sided with the Yamri, betrayal from the stars. The Galactic Republic prided itself on being a force for peace and justice in the galaxy. From their gleaming temples on Coruscant, the Jedi Knights served as the Republic's moral compass and peacekeepers. They mediated disputes, protected the innocent, and worked to maintain order across thousands of star systems. When reports reached the Jedi Council of a conflict between the Kaleesh and the Yamri, they dispatched investigators to determine the facts and broker a peace settlement. What they found was a species called the Huk, who claimed to be the victims of unprovoked Kaleesh aggression. The Yamra representatives who met with Jedi negotiators painted a carefully crafted picture of events. They portrayed themselves as a peaceful, technologically advanced civilization that had been attacked by savage primitives from a neighboring world. They showed evidence of Kaleesh raids on their colonies, of violence and destruction wrought by tribal warriors. They pleaded for Republic intervention to protect them from extermination. What they carefully omitted was the decades of aggression that had preceded Kaleesh retaliation. They said nothing of their invasions of Kalee, their enslavement of Kaleesh civilians, their own brutal tactics. To the Jedi investigators who lacked full context, the Yamri appeared to be innocent victims. The Kaleesh had no diplomatic corps, no sophisticated understanding of galactic politics. They were warriors, not negotiators. When Jedi representatives finally made contact with them, Grievous and other Kaleesh leaders attempted to explain their position, to describe the decades of suffering that had driven them to war. But their words were translated poorly and filtered through cultural misunderstandings. To the Jedi, the Kaleesh appeared to be exactly what the Yamri had described: savage warriors who had launched a war of conquest against a more advanced neighbor. The evidence of Kaleesh forces occupying Hook worlds seemed to confirm this assessment. The Jedi Council reached a decision that would prove catastrophic for the Kaleesh people. The Galactic Republic intervened on behalf of the Yamri. A Republic military force arrived in the system with orders to end the conflict and restore the Huk to their home world. The Jedi leading the delegation informed Grievous and the Kaleesh leadership that they must withdraw from Hook immediately and accept Republic mediation of the dispute. Grievous was stunned. These outsiders who knew nothing of what his people had endured, who had not witnessed the horrors the Yamri had inflicted, were ordering him to give up everything the Kaleesh had fought for. They were demanding that he trust the very government that had ignored Kaleesh suffering for decades, but rushed to help the Huk the moment they faced consequences. He refused. The confrontation that followed demonstrated the overwhelming military superiority the Republic could bring to bear. Kaleesh forces, exhausted from years of war and equipped with limited technology, could not hope to match Republic capital ships and trained military personnel. The Jedi negotiators made it clear: withdraw peacefully or be driven out by force. Faced with the certainty of defeat and the potential for massive Kaleesh casualties, Grievous had no choice. He ordered his forces to evacuate Huk and return to Kalee. The warriors who had sacrificed so much to conquer their enemy's home world watched helplessly as Republic forces escorted them away and reinstalled Yamri leadership. But the Republic's intervention did not stop there. Citing Kaleesh aggression and the need to prevent future conflicts, the Republic imposed heavy sanctions on Kalee. Trade restrictions strangled the planet's economy. Access to off-world technology and medicine was severely limited. The Kaleesh found themselves isolated and impoverished. The planet that had already suffered through decades of war now faced economic catastrophe. Famine spread as the agricultural system, disrupted by years of conflict, could not recover without access to off-world resources. Medical supplies ran short, leaving the wounded from the war without proper treatment. What the Huck had failed to accomplish through direct aggression, the Republic's sanctions achieved through slow starvation. Thousands of Kaleesh died in the years following the Republic's intervention, not from combat, but from hunger and disease and economic collapse. They had won their war against the Huck only to be defeated by bureaucratic punishment from a government that had never bothered to understand their situation. For Grievous, this betrayal was almost incomprehensible. The Republic claimed to stand for justice, yet they had sided with the aggressors. The Jedi called themselves peacekeepers, yet their intervention had brought only suffering to his people. Everything he had heard about these supposed guardians of galactic order was revealed as hypocrisy. The hatred that had previously been focused on the Huck expanded to encompass the Republic and especially the Jedi Order. Grievous saw them as self-righteous enforcers of an unjust system, beings who use their power to protect the strong and punish the weak. They spoke of peace, but understood nothing of real justice. They claimed moral authority, but were blind to their own complicity in suffering. As he watched his people starve, as children died from treatable illnesses because sanctions prevented medicine from reaching Kalee, as warriors who had survived years of combat succumbed to malnutrition, Grievous's grief and rage found a new target. The Jedi had become, in his mind, the embodiment of everything wrong with the galaxy. If he had the power, he would see them destroyed, every last one. But he was trapped. The Kaleesh lacked the resources to challenge the Republic. They were isolated, their economy in ruins, their military capabilities negligible compared to the forces the Republic could deploy. Grievous commanded warriors of incredible skill and courage, but what good were such qualities against starvation? The answer came from an unexpected source: the banking clan's offer. The Intergalactic Banking Clan was one of the most powerful corporate entities in the Republic, a financial institution with influence that reached across the galaxy. They funded major projects, facilitated trade between star systems, and wielded economic power that rivaled that of entire planetary governments. The banking clan was always looking for investment opportunities, and they saw potential in the Kaleesh situation. Chairman Sandhill, the head of the banking clan, dispatched representatives to Kalee with a proposition. The banking clan would provide financial assistance to help the planet recover from the economic sanctions. They would supply resources, technology, medicine, everything the Kaleesh needed to survive and rebuild. In exchange, they wanted access to one particular resource Kalee possessed in abundance. They wanted Grievous. The banking clan had been monitoring the Kaleesh-Huck conflict and had taken note of Grievous's exceptional military capabilities. They saw him as an asset that could be employed to protect banking clan interests across the galaxy. There were always threats to their operations: pirates, rival corporations, local governments that needed persuasion. Grievous could lead security forces that would address these problems. The offer was presented as a simple employment contract. Grievous would serve as an enforcer for the banking clan, commanding military operations on their behalf. In return, the banking clan would channel significant resources to Kalee, helping his people recover from the devastation of war and sanctions. Grievous was deeply suspicious. He had just learned painfully that promises from powerful galactic entities meant nothing. Why should he trust the banking clan any more than he had trusted the Republic? What guarantee did he have that they would actually help his people rather than exploit them further? But the representatives pointed out a harsh truth. The Kaleesh had no other options. The Republic's sanctions would not be lifted. No other major power was offering assistance. His people would continue to suffer and die unless something changed. The banking clan's offer might not be ideal, but it represented the only path forward. The decision tormented Grievous. Accepting meant leaving Kalee, abandoning his people at their most vulnerable moment to work for off-world corporate interests. It meant participating in the very type of galactic power structure he had come to despise. Everything in him rebelled against the idea, but his warriors were dying. Children were starving. The alternative was to watch his civilization slowly crumble while he stood by helplessly. In the end, Grievous accepted. He would serve the banking clan as their enforcer. He would command their security forces and protect their interests across the galaxy. And in exchange, resources would flow to Kalee, giving his people a chance to survive. He told himself it was temporary. He would work for the banking clan long enough to ensure Kalee's recovery, then find a way to extract himself from the arrangement. It was a sacrifice, one more burden to bear in a life that had become nothing but sacrifice. What he could not have known was that Sand Hill and the banking clan had plans for him that extended far beyond simple employment. They had been in contact with certain other parties, individuals with ambitions that would reshape the entire galaxy. And those individuals had very specific ideas about what Grievous could become. The shuttle that would take him off-world was already being prepared, but unbeknownst to anyone except Sand Hill and his co-conspirators, that shuttle had been sabotaged. The device planted in its systems was designed to trigger at a specific moment, ensuring that Grievous would not reach his destination intact. Count Dooku of Sereno, former Jedi Master and secret Sith Lord, had watched Grievous's career with great interest. He saw the Kaleesh warrior's potential, recognized the hatred that burned within him, but he also understood that Grievous, in his current form, while formidable, was limited. His organic body, though enhanced through years of training, could never match the speed and power of beings trained in the Force. To become the weapon Dooku envisioned, Grievous would need to be transformed. He would need to transcend the limitations of flesh and become something new, something that could stand against Jedi Knights and emerge victorious. The shuttle crash would provide the perfect opportunity for that transformation. The crash Grievous boarded the shuttle Marta, accompanied by 7 members of his Izvoshra. These warriors had insisted on accompanying their commander off-world, unwilling to let him face whatever challenges awaited without their protection. Grievous had accepted their loyalty, grateful for their presence, even as he worried about what dangers they might face in galactic civilization. The flight began normally. The shuttle lifted off from Kaleesh's surface and began its journey toward the coordinates where Grievous was to meet with banking clan representatives. The Kaleesh warriors were quiet, processing the strangeness of their surroundings. Most had never been off-world before. The technology of the shuttle, primitive by Republic standards but advanced compared to anything on Kalee, fascinated and unsettled them. Grievous sat in contemplation, his mind churning with thoughts of what lay ahead. He wore his father's muumuu skull mask, a tangible connection to his heritage and his people. Beneath it, his expression was grim. He was leaving everything he knew, everything that mattered, to serve strangers in a galaxy that had already proven itself hostile to his kind. The explosion came without warning. The sabotage device triggered as planned, catastrophically failing multiple systems simultaneously. The shuttle's engines overloaded, fire erupted through the passenger compartment, and the entire vessel began breaking apart under the stress of uncontrolled acceleration. Grievous had a moment to register what was happening, to see the terror in his warrior's eyes before the world became fire and pain and tumbling chaos. The shuttle, no longer capable of controlled flight, plummeted toward the surface of a nearby moon. The impact was devastating. The shuttle hit at tremendous velocity, disintegrating on contact with the ground. Debris scattered across kilometers of barren landscape. The explosion that followed consumed what little remained. Rescue crews arrived within hours, dispatched by the banking clan who had been monitoring the shuttle's trajectory. What they found in the wreckage shocked even experienced emergency responders. The 7 Isvoshra warriors had been killed instantly, their bodies torn apart by the crash, but somehow, impossibly, Grievous had survived. His survival came at horrific cost. When the rescue team pulled him from the wreckage, they found a being who was more dead than alive. Massive trauma had destroyed most of his body. His limbs were shattered beyond repair. His torso was crushed, organs ruptured, bones reduced to fragments. Burns covered what little remained of his skin. By any reasonable assessment, Grievous should have died in the crash. Perhaps he should have died in the moments afterward as his ruined body struggled to maintain basic functions. But he clung to life with a ferocity that defied medical explanation. Some spark within him refused to surrender, refused to accept death, even when death would have been merciful. The rescue team stabilized him as best they could and transported him to a banking clan medical facility. The doctors who examined him delivered a unanimous verdict. There was nothing they could do. His injuries were too extensive. Even with advanced medical technology, no treatment could restore him to functionality. The kindest option would be to make him comfortable and let nature take its course. But the banking clan had other plans. Count Dooku arrived at the medical facility personally, accompanied by cyberneticists and biotechnicians who had been standing by for precisely this eventuality. He surveyed the broken body of Grievous and saw not tragedy, but opportunity. Here was the raw material from which he could forge something magnificent. The medical staff were told that extraordinary measures would be taken to save Grievous's life. What they were not told was that saving his life meant discarding almost everything that remained of his organic body and replacing it with mechanical equivalents. Grievous floated in and out of consciousness during this period, kept alive by machines, his mind clouded by pain and medication. When he surfaced into something resembling awareness, he heard voices discussing his condition, debating procedures, but the words meant nothing to him. He was too far gone to understand or consent to what was being done. The reconstruction. The transformation of Grievous into a cyborg was one of the most extensive cybernetic reconstruction projects ever undertaken. The biotechnicians worked under direct supervision from Dooku, who had very specific requirements for what the end result should be. First, they carefully extracted what remained of Grievous's brain, the only organic component that absolutely had to be preserved. The brain would be the core of the new construct, the seat of Grievous's consciousness and tactical genius. Everything else was secondary. They also preserved his eyes. Dooku insisted that Grievous retain its ability to see naturally, arguing that visual perception connected to organic neural pathways would provide advantages over purely electronic sensors. The eyes were distinctive, unmistakably Kaleesh, and they would serve as a reminder of what Grievous had been. Beyond the brain and eyes, only minimal organic material was retained. Parts of the spinal column were preserved to interface with the cybernetic nervous system. Certain vital organs, his heart, parts of his lungs, his liver, and other essential systems were kept in a sealed organic sac that would sit within the cybernetic shell. These organs were necessary for maintaining the brain, providing it with oxygenated blood, and managing biological processes that could not be fully replicated mechanically. Everything else was discarded. The cybernetic body they built to house these remnants was a masterpiece of engineering, though it was also horrifying in its departure from natural form. The basic structure was humanoid, standing 7 feet and 1 inch tall when fully extended, designed to be imposing and intimidating. But there, the resemblance to organic life ended. The torso was an armored shell containing the organic components in their protective housing. The arms were mechanical marvels, capable of separating to create 4 independent limbs that could wield weapons simultaneously. The legs were digitigrade, like the hind limbs of many predatory species, providing enhanced mobility and the ability to make explosive leaps. The head was perhaps the most unsettling element. The biotechnicians created a faceplate that deliberately mimicked Grievous's Muumuu's skull mask, the ancestral artifact he had worn into battle. They reasoned that providing visual continuity with his past would help his mind accept the transformation. The mask was built into the cybernetic structure, becoming a permanent part of his face rather than a removable item. Behind this mask, they installed a vocabulator that would reproduce Grievous's voice. They had recordings from before the crash and were able to create a synthetic approximation that was nearly indistinguishable from his original vocal patterns. This would allow Grievous to speak and maintain his identity through the one sense that most clearly communicated personality. But the most controversial aspect of the reconstruction was something Grievous would never know about. Dooku had ordered the biotechnicians to make subtle modifications to Grievous's brain itself. These alterations were designed to enhance certain characteristics while suppressing others. His tactical capabilities and combat instincts were amplified, neural pathways associated with strategic thinking reinforced and optimized. His aggression was enhanced, lowering thresholds for violent response. Most significantly, many of his memories were suppressed or altered, particularly those that might have made him question his circumstances. Dooku wanted Grievous to retain his hatred of the Jedi, his tactical genius, and his ruthless efficiency. But he did not want Grievous to retain too much memory of who he had been before, or to ask too many questions about how he had ended up in this condition. Selective memory modification would accomplish both goals. Additionally, Dooku arranged for Grievous's life support systems to be sustained through a highly unusual method. The blood that circulated through his remaining organic systems was enriched with midi-chlorians harvested from Jedi Master Sifo Dyas, whom Dooku had personally killed years earlier. These midi-chlorians would not grant Grievous any ability to use the Force, but they would help his organic components remain viable within the cybernetic shell and would attune him to recognizing Jedi combat techniques. The entire reconstruction process took months. During this time, Grievous remained in a medically induced coma, his consciousness suppressed while his brain adjusted to its new circumstances. The biotechnicians monitored him constantly, making adjustments as complications arose, refining the interfaces between organic and mechanical systems. When they finally judged the integration complete enough to attempt awakening him, nobody was quite sure what to expect. Would Grievous's mind accept its new prison? Would the modifications to his brain have damaged his personality beyond recovery? Would he reject the transformation entirely, perhaps choosing death over this mechanical existence? They initiated the awakening protocol gradually, allowing Grievous's consciousness to resurface in stages. The first thing he became aware of was sensation, though it felt wrong in ways his compromised mind couldn't immediately identify. He could feel, but the texture of those feelings was alien, processed through sensors rather than nerve endings. Then came vision. His eyes opened, and he saw the ceiling of the medical facility above him. But his perspective was wrong, higher than it should be, and his visual field included data overlays he didn't understand. Information scrolled past his peripheral vision. System status reports his brain was already learning to interpret, even though he had never seen such displays before. He tried to move and felt his limbs respond, but the sensation was profoundly disturbing. The movements felt powerful, precise, but not his own. It was as if he was operating a piece of heavy machinery rather than inhabiting a body. The technicians helped him stand, supporting the weight of his new form as his systems finished calibrating. Grievous looked down at himself and saw metal where flesh should be, mechanical joints where organic articulation should have existed, armored plating where skin should have covered bone. And then the memories came flooding back. The war, Ronderu, the crash, 7 of his Isvoshra killed, his own body destroyed. Grievous screamed. The sound that emerged from his vocabulator was inhuman, a synthesized howl of anguish and rage that echoed through the medical facility. He ripped free from the technicians supporting him and began destroying everything within reach. His new mechanical arms possessed strength far beyond what his organic limbs had been capable of. And he used that strength to tear apart medical equipment, smash consoles, reduce the reconstruction laboratory to wreckage. A group of IG-100 Magna Guards rushed into the room, droid bodyguards specifically designed to handle dangerous situations. They moved to restrain Grievous, but he tore through them like they were nothing. His forearms became a whirlwind of destruction, ripping droids apart with mechanical precision, even as his mind remained lost in grief-fueled fury. The rampage continued until Grievous had exhausted himself, his remaining organic components reaching their limits. He collapsed among the wreckage he had created, his mechanical body still functional, but his mind and organic systems too depleted to continue. Count Dooku, who had been observing from a secure location, smiled. The violent outburst was actually a positive sign. It demonstrated that Grievous had retained his capacity for fury, his instinct for destruction. These qualities would be essential for what Dooku had planned. But Dooku also recognized that Grievous would need careful handling. The cyborg warrior was powerful but unstable, a weapon that might just as easily turn on its wielder if not properly directed. Dooku would need to provide Grievous with purpose, with enemies to hate and goals to pursue. He would need to transform raw rage into controlled violence. He would need to teach Grievous to be something more than a warrior. He would need to teach him to be a hunter of Jedi. The education of a Jedi killer. When Grievous finally emerged from his initial rage and trauma, he found himself alone in a private chamber aboard a banking clan vessel. His mechanical body responded to his thoughts with unsettling precision, movements sharp and exact in ways organic flesh had never been. The chamber's walls were polished metal, and in their reflective surface he could see what he had become, a monster. The figure that stared back at him bore only the slightest resemblance to the Kaleesh warrior he had been. Yes, his faceplate mimicked his ancestral mask. And yes, his eyes remained organically his own. But the rest was pure machine, cold metal, and artificial joints. He had become the very thing his people feared most, something that could not be honored in death, something that existed in the liminal space between living and dead. Count Dooku entered the chamber without announcement, his presence commanding despite his aged appearance. The former Jedi Master carried himself with aristocratic grace, his elegant clothes and refined manner presenting a stark contrast to the mechanical horror of Grievous's new form. "You are alive," Dooku said simply. "That is what matters." Grievous's vocabulator produced a sound like grinding metal as he attempted speech. When words finally came, they emerged in his own voice, synthesized but recognizable. "What have you done to me?" "I have saved your life," Dooku replied. "The crash should have killed you. Your body was destroyed beyond any possibility of natural healing. The reconstruction was the only option. 7 of my warriors are dead." The words came out flat, emotionless, but the mechanical fingers of Grievous's hands clenched into fists. "The shuttle was sabotaged." Dooku's expression did not change. "Indeed, by the Jedi." The lie was calculated, delivered with perfect conviction. Dooku had reviewed everything he knew about Grievous's psychology and understood precisely which buttons to push. The Kaleesh warrior already hated the Jedi for their intervention in his war. Now Dooku would transform that hatred into something far more potent. "The Jedi Order discovered your arrangement with the banking clan," Dooku continued. "They saw you as a threat, a warrior too dangerous to be allowed to operate freely in the galaxy. They arranged the sabotage to eliminate you before you could become problematic. It was a masterful manipulation. The story aligned perfectly with Grievous's existing beliefs about Jedi treachery. They had sided with the hook against the Kaleesh. They had imposed sanctions that killed thousands of his people. Why wouldn't they also arrange an assassination to eliminate a warrior who might challenge their power? "Where are they?" Grievous demanded. The question came out as a synthesized growl, barely recognizable as language. "Everywhere," Dooku said. "The Jedi Order has 10,000 members spread across the galaxy. They are the Republic's enforcers, the guardians of an unjust system. They use their powers to impose their will on countless civilizations." He moved closer to Grievous, meeting the cyborg's eyes directly. "But I can teach you to fight them, to kill them, to make them pay for what they have done to your people and to you." "I am no Jedi," Grievous said. "I have no connection to this force they wield." "The force is simply another tool," Dooku replied. "A powerful one, certainly, but not invincible. Your new body grants you speed and strength that rival force enhancement. With proper training in lightsaber combat, you can match any Jedi in single combat. And unlike them, you are not bound by their codes or philosophies. You can fight without restraint." He produced a lightsaber from his robes. The weapon ignited with a distinctive snap hiss, its blue blade humming with barely contained energy. "This belonged to Jedi Master Sifo Dyas, whom I killed several years ago. I offer it to you as your first trophy, the first addition to what will become a collection that inspires terror across the galaxy." Grievous took the lightsaber, his mechanical hand closing around the hilt. The weight was perfect, the balance exquisite. He had seen Jedi wield these weapons, had witnessed their effectiveness in combat. The idea of turning a Jedi's own weapon against them held a certain poetic justice. "Will you teach me?" he asked. "I will teach you everything," Dooku promised. "All 7 forms of lightsaber combat. The techniques the Jedi have perfected over millennia, the strategies they use, the tactics they favor, their strengths and weaknesses. When I am finished, you will be the most dangerous Jedi hunter in the galaxy." Thus began Grievous's education under Count Dooku. The training took place aboard various banking clan vessels and at secret facilities scattered across the galaxy. Dooku had been one of the greatest lightsaber duelists the Jedi Order ever produced, a master of Form 2 Makashi, the precision dueling form. He brought that expertise to bear in transforming Grievous into a weapon capable of killing Force users. The training began with basic forms. Form I, Shi Cho, the foundational style every Jedi learned. Dooku had Grievous practice the basic strikes and parries thousands of times, drilling the patterns into his mechanical body until they became automatic responses. The cyborg's enhanced processing capabilities allowed him to absorb techniques at an accelerated rate, though he still needed to develop the muscle memory, or its cybernetic equivalent, that made movements truly instinctive. Form 2, Makashi, was Dooku's specialty, and he devoted considerable time to teach its intricacies. This form focused on blade work, on precision and economy of motion. It was designed for lightsaber-to-lightsaber combat, perfect for dueling other Force users. Grievous took to it naturally, his analytical mind appreciating the calculated nature of the style. Form 3, Soresu, the defensive form that emphasized protection and endurance. Form 4, Ataru, the acrobatic style that relied on Force-enhanced agility. Form 5, both its Xian and Gem So variants, styles built around power and counterattacking. Form 66, Niman, the balanced form that incorporated elements from all others. And finally, Form 7, Juyo, the aggressive form that bordered on barely controlled chaos. Dooku taught Grievous all of them. Most Jedi specialized in one or two forms, but Grievous's mechanical nature allowed him to master techniques that would have been contradictory for an organic warrior. His body could shift from the flowing precision of Makashi to the brutal power of Gemso without the physical limitations that constrained normal beings. Moreover, his mechanical arms could operate independently in ways no organic being could replicate. Grievous learned to split his attention, wielding multiple lightsabers simultaneously in different forms. He might use Makashi with one blade for precision strikes, while another arm employed Gemso's heavy power attacks. The combinations were endless and deeply disturbing to face in actual combat. But technical skill was only part of the training. Dooku also taught Grievous the psychological aspects of Jedi combat. He explained how Jedi thought, how they perceived the Force, how they relied on it during battle. More importantly, he taught Grievous how to weaponize fear against Force-sensitive opponents. The Jedi claimed to be fearless, Dooku explained during one lesson. They trained to overcome emotion, to find serenity even in combat. But this training has a weakness. When faced with something that truly frightens them, something that disrupts their connection to the Force, they become vulnerable. He demonstrated by showing Grievous recordings of Jedi in combat, analyzing their movements and reactions. Watch how they move with confidence when they sense an opponent through the Force. They know where attacks will come from. They anticipate danger. But what happens when they face an enemy they cannot sense, whose movements are mechanical rather than organic, whose mind is alien to their Force perception? Grievous understood immediately. His cybernetic nature made him difficult for Jedi to read through the Force. His thoughts were partially shielded by the mechanical components integrated into his brain. His movements, driven by servos and hydraulics rather than organic muscles, felt wrong to Force-sensitive perception. "You will use this to your advantage," Dooku continued. "Your appearance, your mechanical nature, your very presence will unsettle Jedi. They are trained to face organic opponents who telegraph their intentions through the Force. You will be a void to them, something their senses cannot properly perceive. In that moment of uncertainty, you strike." The lessons extended beyond personal combat to include tactics and strategy. Grievous's natural genius for military operations remained intact, enhanced, if anything, by his cybernetic processing capabilities. Dooku taught him how Jedi operated in military contexts, how they commanded clone troopers, how they made tactical decisions informed by Force visions. "The Jedi are arrogant," Dooku said. "They believe their connection to the Force makes them superior strategists. Sometimes they are correct, but their reliance on Force intuition also makes them predictable. They follow patterns, favor certain approaches. Learn these patterns, and you can anticipate their moves before they make them." Grievous absorbed everything with the focus of someone who had found new purpose. The grief that consumed him, the rage at his transformation, the hatred for those he blamed for his fate, all of it was channeled into this single goal: becoming the most effective Jedi killer possible. Dooku also provided Grievous with his personal bodyguards, a unit of IG-100 Magna Guard droids. These sophisticated combat droids were designed specifically to fight Force users. Grievous trained them personally, teaching them the 7 lightsaber forms, drilling them in tactics designed to exploit Jedi weaknesses. The Magna Guards became an extension of Grievous's will, warriors who could support him in combat and continue fighting even when their primary systems were damaged. The Magna Guards wore cloaks and hoods similar to those worn by the Izvoshra, Grievous's original bodyguards who had died in the shuttle crash. This was not coincidence. Grievous insisted on the styling as a way of honoring those fallen warriors. In his damaged, modified mind, the droids were in some sense carrying on the legacy of the Kaleesh warriors who had served him. After months of intense training, Dooku decided to test Grievous's capabilities against real opponents. He arranged a match in a secure facility, pitting Grievous against 2 of the Confederacy's deadliest warriors, Asajj Ventress, Dooku's own dark side apprentice and a formidable lightsaber duelist, and Dirge, a Jedi bounty hunter who had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. Both Ventress and Dirge were confident they could defeat this new cyborg warrior. Ventress in particular resented Grievous, seeing him as competition for Dooku's attention and favor. She entered the test arena determined to demonstrate that her skills exceeded those of any mechanical monster. The fight was brief and decisive. Grievous engaged both opponents simultaneously, his 4 arms allowing him to wield multiple lightsabers at once while maintaining perfect defensive positioning. Ventress found her dual blade attacks parried with contemptuous ease, while Dirge's brute strength was negated by Grievous's mechanical power and superior technique. Within minutes, Grievous had disarmed Ventress and pinned Dirge to the ground with a lightsaber at his throat. The cyborg general stood over his defeated opponents and looked to Dooku, who watched from an observation platform. "Excellent," Dooku said. The single word carried approval that Grievous found surprisingly satisfying. After the trauma of his transformation, after losing everything that had defined him, he had found something new, purpose, and someone who recognized his value. "I am ready," Grievous said. His vocabulary had improved with practice, the sounds of his speech becoming more natural, though still tinged with mechanical undertones. "Yes," Dooku agreed, "you are ready to become the Supreme Marshal Commander of the Separatist droid armies." The Supreme Commander, the Clone Wars, began officially in 22 BBY, so with the Battle of Geonosis. Though the conflict had been brewing for years, as star systems seceded from the Galactic Republic to form the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Count Dooku publicly led the Separatist movement as its political head of state, but he needed a military commander capable of leading the Confederacy's vast droid armies. General Grievous was the perfect choice. His appointment as Supreme Marshal Commander gave him authority over millions of battle droids and thousands of warships. The Separatist military was unlike anything seen in galactic history. A completely synthetic army that felt no fear, needed no food or rest, and could be manufactured in vast quantities. Combined with Grievous's tactical genius and personal combat capabilities, the droid army became a devastating force. Grievous's first major engagement was actually at Geonosis, though his presence remained secret from the Republic. Dooku wanted to reveal his new weapon at the perfect moment, when Grievous could make the maximum impact on Jedi morale. So the cyborg general observed the battle from the shadows, analyzing how the Jedi and their clone troops operated, gathering intelligence that would inform future campaigns. What he saw confirmed everything Dooku had taught him. The Jedi led from the front, exposing themselves to danger in the belief that their Force powers made them invulnerable. They commanded clone troopers with admirable bravery but predictable tactics. They were, Grievous concluded, beatable, and he would be the one to beat them. The Republic believed it had won a decisive victory at Geonosis, capturing Dooku and decapitating Separatist leadership. What they did not know was that Dooku's capture was intentional, part of a larger plan, and that the real threat to the Republic was just beginning to reveal itself. Grievous launched his public military career with a campaign designed specifically to terrorize the Republic and establish his reputation. The Battle of Hyperi, which occurred in the early months of the Clone Wars, would become legendary as the moment the galaxy learned to fear General Grievous. A Republic force led by several Jedi Knights had established a base on the planet Hyperi. The facility was well defended, equipped with automated turrets, and protected by a substantial clone trooper garrison. The Jedi believed they were safe there, using the base as a staging ground for operations in the surrounding systems. They were wrong. Grievous arrived with overwhelming force, but rather than simply crushing the facility with superior numbers, he set a trap. He allowed the Republic defenders to mount a successful defense of the primary base, luring the Jedi into believing they could hold. Then, he systematically eliminated their support structure, destroying clone positions and cutting off supply lines. When the Jedi finally realized the trap, it was too late. They found themselves isolated in the ruins of the base, surrounded by droid forces with no hope of rescue. That was when Grievous revealed himself personally. The recordings of what happened next spread across the galaxy, transmitted by Republic emergency channels before Grievous destroyed their communication equipment. The images showed a mechanical monstrosity emerging from the smoke and devastation, wielding multiple lightsabers, moving with inhuman speed and grace. 6 Jedi faced him: Dakman Barak, Tarsair, Sha'agi, Kakruk, Ila Sakura, and Ki Adi-Mundi. All were experienced knights or masters, warriors who had survived numerous battles. They should have been more than a match for any single opponent. Grievous killed Sha'agi in seconds, his lightsabers punching through the young Padawan's defenses before the boy could even process what he was facing. Dakman Barak and Tarsair fell moments later, their forms simply inadequate against the mechanical precision and overwhelming speed of Grievous's assault. The remaining Jedi fought desperately, their combined powers barely holding the cyborg general at bay. Ila Sakura was badly wounded, Kakruk was struck down though he would survive, and Ki Adi-Mundi lost his lightsaber. Only the timely arrival of Republic reinforcements saved the remaining Jedi from complete annihilation. But the damage was done. The galaxy had seen what General Grievous could do. The Jedi, supposedly invincible guardians, had been slaughtered by a mechanical monster who wielded their own weapons against them. Fear began to spread through Republic ranks. If Grievous could kill multiple Jedi simultaneously, what chance did ordinary soldiers have against him? Grievous reveled in the terror his appearance generated. He had become exactly what Dooku had promised: a Jedi hunter, a killer of Force users, a monster that haunted the nightmares of the Republic's greatest warriors. And he was just getting started. The collection grows after Hypery. Grievous began actively hunting Jedi across the galaxy. He would identify isolated Jedi, track them to remote locations, and ambush them with overwhelming force. His tactical approach was methodical. First, he would analyze the target Jedi's combat style, studying recordings of their previous battles. Then, he would plan an attack that exploited their specific weaknesses. Every lightsaber Grievous claimed became a trophy, added to a growing collection he kept in his private fortress on Vasek's third moon. But he did not merely collect the weapons. He also took Padawan braids, the traditional symbol worn by Jedi apprentices. These braids were displayed in his trophy room like the scalps of defeated enemies, a grisly testament to his effectiveness as a Jedi killer. The fortress itself was designed to reflect Grievous's nature as a warrior. Statues depicted him at different stages of his life, from his original Kaleesh form through various stages of cybernetic enhancement. The rooms were filled with weapons and armor from his campaigns, creating a shrine to violence that both honored and mourned what he had been. Jedi Master Kit Fisto and his former Padawan Nadar Veb discovered the lair during what they believed was a mission to capture Separatist leader Newt Gunray. Instead, they found themselves in Grievous's domain, surrounded by evidence of his many kills. The trophy room alone contained dozens of lightsabers and countless Padawan braids, each representing a young life cut short. Nadar was outraged by what he saw, his anger overriding his Jedi training. He had just been elevated to knighthood and felt the need to prove himself. When Grievous returned to his fortress and confronted the intruders, Nadar abandoned caution and attacked with righteous fury. It was exactly the response Grievous had been trained to exploit. Emotional Jedi were vulnerable Jedi, their connection to the Force disrupted by anger and fear. Grievous dismantled Nadar's defenses methodically, demonstrating the difference between an experienced warrior and an overconfident knight. The duel ended with Nadar's death, killed not with a lightsaber, but with a blaster, Grievous demonstrating his willingness to use any tactic that achieved victory. Kit Fisto managed to escape, but the incident confirmed what many in the Republic feared. Grievous was specifically targeting Padawans and recently elevated knights, the least experienced Jedi. He was hunting the young because they were easier prey, allowing him to build his collection while avoiding the most dangerous Jedi Masters. This tactical cowardice, as some called it, was actually sophisticated strategy. Grievous understood that killing young Jedi had multiple benefits. First, it was safer for him, reducing his risk in combat. Second, it demoralized the Jedi Order, making them fear for their students. Third, it demonstrated that even relatively weak Force users were beyond reach of Republic protection. And fourth, each young Jedi he killed was one fewer future Jedi Master the Republic would have. His collection continued to grow. Neebo's lightsaber was added after the Jedi Master disappeared on a mission to protect refugees. Eth Koth's blade came into his possession after Grievous captured the Jedi Council member, though Koth himself was later rescued. Adi Gallia's weapon joined the collection after a brutal confrontation aboard a Republic cruiser. With each edition, Grievous's reputation grew darker. Parents across the Republic warned their Force-sensitive children about the mechanical monster who hunted Jedi. Even experienced knights felt dread when reports indicated Grievous was operating in their sector. The psychological impact of his campaign rivaled the military devastation his droid armies inflicted. But Grievous did not hunt exclusively for easy targets. He engaged some of the Republic's finest warriors, testing himself against the Jedi's greatest champions. His battles with Obi-Wan Kenobi became legendary, a rivalry that would define both warriors. The nemesis, Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi, represented everything Grievous hated about the Jedi Order. Calm, rational, guided by the Force, yet not dominated by it, Kenobi embodied the Jedi ideal. He was also frustratingly difficult to kill. Their first encounter set the tone for all that followed. Grievous had expected to overwhelm Kenobi with speed and ferocity, to cut him down before the Jedi could mount an effective defense. Instead, he found himself facing a master of Soresu, the defensive form, who turned Grievous's aggression against him. Kenobi did not try to match Grievous's power or speed. Instead, he conserved energy, maintaining perfect defensive positioning, waiting for his opponent to overextend. It was infuriating. Every attack Grievous launched was deflected or parried. Every combination that had worked against other Jedi failed against Kenobi's ironclad defense. The duel ended inconclusively, with Grievous choosing to retreat rather than risk defeat. As he escaped, he felt something he had not experienced since before his transformation: respect for an opponent. Kenobi was dangerous precisely because he did not rely on raw power or aggressive tactics. He was patient, methodical, willing to fight a purely defensive battle for as long as necessary. They would clash many more times throughout the Clone Wars. Aboard Grievous's flagship Malevolence, which mounted a devastating ion cannon capable of disabling entire Republic fleets, Kenobi led a mission to destroy the weapon. Grievous engaged him personally, their duel raging through the ship's corridors as explosions rocked the vessel. Kenobi escaped, and the Malevolence was destroyed, but not before Grievous's weapon had annihilated multiple Republic task forces. The campaign demonstrated both Grievous's tactical brilliance and his ability to inflict massive casualties through superior technology and strategy. At Camino, the Republic's cloning facilities that produced the clone troopers, Grievous led an assault designed to cripple the Republic's ability to replace military losses. He personally commanded the operation, coordinating simultaneous attacks from space and underwater. The campaign very nearly succeeded, penetrating deep into the cloning complex before Republic reinforcements arrived. During that battle, Grievous faced multiple Jedi simultaneously, including Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker, and others. He held his own through a combination of skill, tactical positioning, and sheer mechanical endurance. Even when forced to retreat, he inflicted substantial damage on the facility and killed numerous clone defenders. His battles with Ahsoka Tano, Anakin's Padawan, showed a different side of Grievous's capabilities. The young Togruta was agile and innovative, her unconventional fighting style creating problems for Grievous's more classical approach. Yet even she could not defeat him, managing only to escape or drive him off temporarily. Throughout these encounters, a pattern emerged. Grievous could face most Jedi in single combat and win. He could engage multiple Jedi simultaneously and at least fight them to a standstill, but he could not defeat the Republic's absolute best warriors. masters like Kenobi or Mace Windu in extended combat. Against them, he relied on hit-and-run tactics, striking hard and fast before withdrawing. This was not the behavior of a coward, but of an intelligent military commander. Grievous understood his limitations. He was not force-sensitive and could not match the absolute peak of Jedi power. But he did not need to. His role was to hunt Jedi when conditions favored him, to kill the vulnerable, and to tie down powerful masters, while his droid armies achieved strategic objectives elsewhere. The Republic poured enormous resources into tracking and eliminating Grievous. Special task forces were assembled specifically to hunt him. Bounties were offered. Jedi were assigned to find and capture him. Yet he continued to evade capture, striking where least expected and vanishing before overwhelming force could be brought against him. His flagship, the Soulless One, became as legendary as the cyborg general himself. The modified starfighter was incredibly fast and maneuverable, allowing Grievous to personally lead starfighter assaults or escape from situations that would have trapped ordinary commanders. He piloted the craft with the same mechanical precision he brought to lightsaber combat, exploiting every advantage and vulnerability in enemy formations. The Malevolence and military campaigns. The Malevolence campaign represented Grievous at his most devastating. The massive Providence-class dreadnought was equipped with twin ion cannons powerful enough to disable entire Republic fleets. Traditional weapons fired projectiles or energy beams that destroyed through kinetic force or thermal damage. The Malevolence's ion cannons instead generated electromagnetic pulses that overloaded electronic systems, leaving ships powerless and defenseless. Grievous understood the psychological advantage this weapon provided. Republic crews entering battle typically feared death or injury. Against the Malevolence, they faced something arguably worse: helplessness. The ion cannons would strike, systems would fail, and then they would drift in space, waiting for either rescue or the follow-up attack that would destroy their defenseless vessel. The terror this inspired paralyzed Republic military responses in the sectors where Grievous operated. Ships refused deployment to areas where the Malevolence might appear. Crews demanded transfers away from the threat. The weapon disrupted Republic strategy far beyond its actual destructive capability. During the Malevolence's operational period, Grievous destroyed numerous Republic task forces with minimal Separatist losses. The ship would emerge from hyperspace, fire its ion cannons to disable enemy vessels, then either destroy them with conventional weapons or leave them drifting as warnings to others. Entire battle groups were annihilated before they could mount effective resistance. The Malevolence campaign only ended when Anakin Skywalker and his forces infiltrated the vessel and sabotaged it from within, while Kenobi attacked from outside. The combined assault forced Grievous to abandon ship, watching from an escape pod as his superweapon crashed into a nearby moon. The loss stung, but Grievous had already demonstrated that he remained dangerous even without overwhelming firepower. His next campaigns relied more on tactical cunning than technological superiority. On Dathomir, Grievous led the assault that destroyed the Night Sister clan, wiping out Asajj Ventress's people on Dooku's orders. The Night Sisters were Force users outside of the Jedi tradition, witches who wielded dark side powers in ways the Separatist leadership found threatening. Grievous commanded the operation with clinical efficiency, his droids overwhelming the Night Sisters' defenses while he personally confronted their leader, Mother Talzin. The massacre of the Night Sisters demonstrated Grievous's willingness to follow orders even when they involved genocide. He felt no sympathy for the victims, saw them as just another target. This moral emptiness made him an ideal servant for Dooku and Darth Sidious, who needed commanders capable of atrocities without hesitation or regret. At Saleokami, Grievous again faced Obi-Wan Kenobi, this time during a campaign to secure Separatist control over the agricultural world. The battle featured extensive ground combat alongside starfighter engagements, allowing Grievous to demonstrate his versatility. He personally led droid forces in assaults on Republic positions while coordinating orbital bombardment and fighter screen actions. His tactical doctrine emphasized overwhelming force at decisive points. Rather than spreading his armies evenly, Grievous would identify critical objectives and commit overwhelming strength to capture them rapidly. This often meant accepting losses elsewhere, but it ensured that key targets fell quickly, disrupting enemy strategy. The Invisible Hand and the Battle of Coruscant. By 19 BBY, the Clone Wars had ground on for 3 years. Millions had died. Entire planetary economies had been devastated. The galaxy yearned for an end to the conflict, but neither side seemed capable of achieving decisive victory. Count Dooku and Darth Sidious decided to force a conclusion through a bold stroke that would shock the Republic to its core: an assault on Coruscant itself. The Republic capital had stood inviolate for 1,000 years. Its location deep in the core worlds, protected by multiple layers of defensive fleets and planetary shields, had made it seem untouchable. Military planners on both sides assumed Coruscant would never fall to direct assault, that the resources required to breach its defenses exceeded what either side could practically deploy. Grievous proved them wrong. The plan was extraordinarily ambitious. Grievous would personally lead a fleet of over 1,000 warships in a surprise attack on Coruscant. The assault would bypass outer defenses through carefully planned hyperspace routes, emerging directly in orbit around the capital. Speed and surprise would be everything. They would have a brief window to accomplish their objective before Republic reinforcements arrived from across the galaxy. That objective was simple: kidnap Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. Grievous did not know that Palpatine was actually Darth Sidious, the secret Sith Lord who had orchestrated the entire Clone Wars. He believed he was capturing the Republic's leader to force a negotiated end to the conflict on Separatist terms. In reality, the kidnapping was theater, a carefully staged event designed to accomplish multiple objectives in Sidious's grand plan. The attack came without warning. Grievous's fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, weapons already charging. The Coruscant Home Defense Fleet, caught completely unprepared, scrambled to respond. Within minutes, the orbital defenses had been shattered, Republic capital ships burned in the space above their own capital world. Grievous commanded from his flagship, the Providence-class dreadnought Invisible Hand. The vessel led the assault, its weapon systems coordinated to maximize devastation. Grievous personally directed fleet movements, his tactical genius evident in how he split Republic formations and isolated strong points for destruction. As the space battle raged, Grievous took a smaller force down to the planet's surface. His target, the Senate building where Chancellor Palpatine maintained his office. Landing battle droids in the heart of Galactic City, Grievous led his Magna Guards in a direct assault on the building. The Senate Guard mounted a desperate defense, but they were ceremonial soldiers facing a mechanized war machine. Grievous carved through them with contemptuous ease, his 4 lightsabers finding every gap in their formation. Clone troopers rushed to reinforce the position, but they arrived too late to prevent Grievous from reaching Palpatine's location. Jedi Masters Roran Korob and Faul Mudama had been assigned to protect the Chancellor. They faced Grievous in the corridors of the Senate building, 2 highly skilled Jedi against the cyborg general and his bodyguards. The battle was brief and brutal. Grievous killed both Jedi, adding their lightsabers to his collection, and captured Palpatine. As Grievous extracted with his prize, Jedi Master Mace Windu arrived for one final attempt to stop him. The confrontation took place atop a moving transport, with Grievous attempting to board his escape shuttle while Windu pursued. The Jedi Master demonstrated why he was considered one of the Order's greatest warriors, his Vapad form overwhelming Grievous's defenses and forcing the cyborg onto the defensive. In desperation, Grievous attempted to escape, but Windu used the Force to crush Grievous's chest plate. The armor that protected his organic components deformed under Force pressure, damaging the lungs and organs within. The injury was severe enough that Grievous's breathing became labored, a mechanical wheeze emerging from his vocabulator as damaged respiratory systems struggled to function. Despite his injury, Grievous managed to board his shuttle with Palpatine and return to the Invisible Hand. The space battle had turned against the Separatists as Republic reinforcements arrived, led by the massive Open Circle fleet under the command of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. Grievous knew the situation had become untenable. With Palpatine secured aboard his flagship, he ordered the fleet to prepare for retreat. But before they could escape, Kenobi and Skywalker infiltrated the Invisible Hand on a rescue mission. The 2 Jedi fought their way to Palpatine's location, where Count Dooku waited to intercept them. In the duel that followed, Anakin killed Dooku, eliminating the Separatist political leadership. This was unexpected and disrupted the carefully orchestrated plans, but Sidious adapted quickly. Grievous learned of Dooku's death and recognized that he was now the ranking Separatist leader. He also realized that with Republic forces overwhelming his fleet, continued engagement would result in total defeat. He made the pragmatic decision to escape, even if it meant abandoning Palpatine and significant military assets. Before fleeing, Grievous confronted the 2 Jedi one final time. His Magna Guard surrounded them, and Grievous spoke the words that would become infamous. "Your lightsabers will make a fine addition to my collection." But R2-D2 intervened, the astromech droid causing chaos among the battle droids and allowing the Jedi to recover their weapons. In the ensuing confusion, Grievous made his escape, shattering the bridge viewport and ejecting into space before making his way to an escape pod. The Invisible Hand was left crippled, crashing toward Coruscant's surface with the Jedi and Chancellor still aboard. Anakin managed to land the forward section of the disintegrating ship, saving everyone on board. But Grievous was gone, having retreated with what remained of his fleet into the Outer Rim. The Battle of Coruscant was simultaneously a Separatist strategic defeat and a personal success for Grievous. The fleet had been devastated, Dooku was dead, and the kidnapping had failed. But Grievous had accomplished the impossible, attacking Coruscant itself and escaping alive. His reputation, already fearsome, became legendary. The end on Utapau. Following the Battle of Coruscant, Grievous found himself in an unexpected position. With Dooku dead, he was now the head of state for the Confederacy of Independent Systems. The Separatist Council looked to him for leadership, though many doubted the cyborg general's political capabilities. Grievous had no interest in politics and made no pretense of understanding diplomatic nuance. He was a military commander, and he approached his new responsibilities through that lens. His primary concern was consolidating Separatist forces for a defensive campaign that could preserve what remained of their territory against renewed Republic assault. He relocated the Separatist Council to Utapau, a remote world in the Outer Rim with extensive underground facilities. The planet's sinkholes provided natural defensive positions. Its isolation made surprise attack difficult, and its native population, the Pauans and Utai, could be controlled through intimidation. Unknown to Grievous, Darth Sidious had already betrayed him. The Sith Lord, now ready to implement the final stages of his plan, leaked Grievous's location to the Republic. The Jedi Council assigned Obi-Wan Kenobi to lead an assault on Utapau with orders to capture or kill the Separatist leader. Kenobi arrived alone initially, landing at Pau City under the pretense of needing to refuel his starfighter. The Pauan administrator, Tian Medon, discreetly informed him that the Separatists occupied the city and held the population hostage. Kenobi sent his astromech droid R4G9 to inform his clone forces while he infiltrated the command center to engage Grievous personally. The confrontation between Kenobi and Grievous was their final meeting, the culmination of years of conflict. Kenobi interrupted a Separatist council meeting, dramatically dropping from above onto the conference floor. His greeting was simple: "Hello there." Grievous dismissed his Magna Guards, choosing to face Kenobi personally. This was part pride and part pragmatism. He wanted to kill Kenobi himself, to claim the Jedi Master's lightsaber as the crown jewel of his collection. But he also recognized that Kenobi's arrival likely meant Republic forces were approaching. The conference needed to end quickly. He ordered the Separatist Council to evacuate to Mustafar while he dealt with Kenobi. Then he ignited 4 lightsabers and attacked, his arms separating to wield all 4 blades simultaneously. The initial assault was devastating, a whirlwind of strikes from multiple angles that should have overwhelmed any defense. But Kenobi was ready. He had fought Grievous many times before and understood his tactics. Rather than trying to match the cyborg's speed or power, Kenobi maintained perfect defensive positioning, using Soresu to neutralize the multi-blade assault. His lightsaber moved economically, always in exactly the right place to intercept attacks. Grievous pressed harder, adding his signature technique, spinning his lightsabers like helicopter blades, creating a shield of deadly energy while advancing on his opponent. The technique, developed through his mechanical capabilities, was nearly impossible to penetrate. Kenobi adapted, using the Force to strike at angles the spinning blades couldn't cover. His blade found Grievous's arm joints, severing 2 of the cyborg's 4 arms. The spinning technique collapsed as Grievous lost half his weapons. The battle continued through the city as clone troopers arrived. Commander Cody leading the 212th Attack Battalion in an assault on Separatist positions. Grievous recognized that he was now outnumbered and outmaneuvered. He retreated toward his personal landing platform where the Soulless One waited, but Kenobi pursued relentlessly. The chase led through Paul City's industrial sectors, Grievous on his wheel bike, while Kenobi rode a varactyl named Boga. They fought across moving platforms and precarious walkways, neither willing to give ground. The duel evolved beyond lightsabers into pure physical combat. Grievous, his remaining mechanical limbs giving him superior strength, nearly overpowered Kenobi multiple times. He tore open his own chest plate to expose the organs within, intending to intimidate Kenobi. Instead, the Jedi saw opportunity. In the final moments, Grievous thought he had won. Kenobi hung from the edge of a platform, his lightsaber lost, apparently defenseless. Grievous advanced with an electro staff, preparing to deliver the killing blow. Then Kenobi used the Force to summon Grievous's own blaster into his hand. The cyborg general had a moment to register shock before Kenobi fired multiple shots directly into his exposed organic components. The blaster fire ignited the fluid that sustained Grievous's organs. His chest cavity erupted in flames as his vital systems failed catastrophically. His eyes, the only part of him that had remained genuinely Kaleesh, burst into flames. The mechanical body collapsed, smoke rising from the scorched remains. General Grievous, supreme commander of the Separatist droid armies, the Jedi hunter who had terrorized the Republic for 3 years, was dead. Commander Cody and his clone troopers secured the area. The Battle of Utapau ended shortly after, Separatist forces surrendering once they learned of Grievous's death. The Clone Wars would officially end within hours as Darth Sidious executed Order 66 and transformed the Republic into the Galactic Empire. But Grievous never knew any of that. He died believing he had been a warrior serving a cause, never realizing he had been a pawn in a Sith Lord's game. The being who had once been Kimayan Jai Shilal, defender of the Kaleesh people, had perished far from home, his body reduced to burning metal and ash. Legacy. After Grievous's death, his body was recovered by Imperial forces on Palpatine's orders. The remains were transported to a secret storehouse on Utapau, along with his personal starfighter and some of his earliest lightsaber trophies. There they remained for years, largely forgotten as the Empire focused on consolidating power and hunting surviving Jedi. Eventually, the body became part of a classified project. Cyberneticist Nikolai Kinnisworthy received authorization to use Grievous's remains in developing advanced battle droid technology. The project, designated NK Necrosis, attempted to create a new generation of combat droids incorporating organic components and advanced artificial intelligence. The result was a droid warrior called ANK Necrosis that considered itself to be the reincarnation of Grievous. It wielded a double-bladed lightsaber that had once belonged to Darth Zana, containing a Sith crystal called Bane's Heart. The droid also carried Grievous's personal blaster, the Grievance Striker. But NK Necrosis's existence was brief. The droid developed an abnormal level of self-awareness and began questioning its purpose and origins. Before it could be deployed or cause significant problems, it was destroyed by a group of spacers who had been hired to investigate the project. Thus ended the final chapter of the Grievous legacy, his remains recycled into a failed experiment that barely survived its creation. His lightsaber collection was cataloged by the Empire. Some weapons were destroyed, others were distributed to inquisitors or kept in Palpatine's private vaults. The Padawan braids and other trophies were disposed of unceremoniously. The careful collection that Grievous had built, each piece representing a fallen Jedi, was scattered and lost. On Kalee, however, Grievous's legacy took a different form. The Kaleesh people never learned the full truth of what had become of their champion. They knew only that Kimayan Jai Shilal, renamed Grievous, had left their world to fight for their survival and had never returned. In the absence of facts, they created mythology. Grievous was elevated to divine status, joining the pantheon of ancestor gods the Kaleesh had worshipped for millennia. Temples dedicated to him featured statues showing him in both his original Kaleesh form and his mechanical incarnation. Warriors prayed to him before battle, asking for a fraction of his tactical genius and fighting spirit. The Kaleesh never knew that their god had spent his final years serving the very type of galactic power structure that had oppressed them. They never learned that he had been manipulated by Sith lords, transformed into a weapon, and ultimately discarded when he was no longer useful. Their mythology preserved the warrior hero who had saved them from the hook, not the tragic cyborg who had lost everything, including himself. Perhaps that was appropriate. The being who died on Utapau bore little resemblance to Kimayan Jai Shilal. The transformation had been more than physical. Grievous's mind had been modified, his memories altered, his very identity reconstructed to serve purposes he never fully understood. In a very real sense, Kimayan Jai Shilal had died in that shuttle crash, and what had emerged was something new and terrible. The Jedi who survived the Clone Wars remembered Grievous as a monster, a mechanical killer who had murdered countless members of their order. They told stories about his ruthlessness, his trophy collection, his willingness to target Padawans and exploit any advantage. In their histories, he became a symbol of the corruption and brutality of the Separatist movement. Military historians studied his campaigns with a mixture of respect and revulsion. Grievous had been undeniably brilliant as a strategist and tactician. His innovations in combined droid warfare, his unconventional approaches to problems, his ability to maximize the efficiency of mechanical soldiers, all of these were worthy of study and emulation. But his utter ruthlessness and willingness to commit atrocities made him a cautionary tale about the dangers of divorcing military effectiveness from moral constraint. The truth, as it often is, was more complex than any simple categorization. Grievous had been a victim before he became a victimizer. The Republic's casual intervention on behalf of the Huck, their sanctions that killed thousands of Kaleesh, their systemic indifference to the suffering of beings on the Outer Rim, all of these had created the conditions that allowed Dooku to transform a grieving warrior into a weapon of terror. If the Jedi had investigated more carefully during the Huk-Kaleesh conflict, if they had recognized that the Yamri were the aggressors rather than the victims, if they had shown even a fraction of the concern for Kalee that they later showed for other planets, Kimayan Jai Shilal might have lived his entire life as a defender of his people. He might have died peacefully, old and honored, and ascended to godhood through deeds of protection rather than destruction. But history does not traffic in might have been. It records only what was. What was? A warrior who lost everything, who was betrayed by those who claimed to represent justice, who was transformed into a monster, and who spent his final years killing beings he believed were responsible for his suffering. What was? A brilliant commander whose tactical genius was wasted in service of a conspiracy he never understood? What was? A being who sought vengeance and found only emptiness. Grievous's cough, that distinctive mechanical wheeze that had terrified so many, fell silent on Utapau. His eyes, which had witnessed horrors and committed worse, went dark. The mechanical body that had given him power beyond mortal limits became just another piece of wreckage on a battlefield. And somewhere, in whatever afterlife exists for beings who are neither fully organic nor fully mechanical, perhaps Kumail Shilal finally found peace. Perhaps he was reunited with Rondaru Lij Kumar, his partner from a life that seemed impossibly distant. Perhaps he shed the mechanical shell and all the trauma it represented and remembered what it felt like to be simply a warrior among his people. Or perhaps there was nothing. Perhaps consciousness simply ceased, and all that remained was the legend, preserved in the memories of those who had known him as hero or monster. The galaxy moved on. The Clone Wars ended, the Empire rose and eventually fell, and new conflicts emerged to replace old ones. General Grievous became a historical figure, his story told and retold always from the perspective of those who had fought against him. But on Kalee, in temples devoted to the ancestor gods, warriors still pray to Grievous. They tell stories of his victories against the Hook, of his protection of their people. They remember him as he was before the transformation, when he was still entirely Kaleesh, when he fought for his people rather than for a cause he did not understand. And perhaps, in those prayers and stories, some fragment of Kumail Shilal lives on, not the cyborg general, not the Jedi hunter, but the young warrior who learned to shoot to protect his family, the hero who partnered with Rondaru in battles across the beaches of Kalee, the defender who drove back the Huck against impossible odds. That is the legacy the Kaleesh preserve. That is the memory they choose to honor. The rest, the tragedy and transformation and ultimate futility, fades into the background of history. Another casualty of the Clone Wars, another being destroyed by conflicts they did not fully understand, serving purposes that were never their own. General Grievous fell on Utapau, burned by blaster fire, his mechanical body failing around his few remaining organic components. But Kumail Shilal, perhaps, fell much earlier. Perhaps he died on a beach watching the waters that had claimed Rondaru. Perhaps he died in the shuttle crash that destroyed his body. Perhaps he died during the reconstruction that turned him into something unrecognizable. Whenever it happened, the loss was complete long before Obi-Wan Kenobi pulled that trigger. The story of General Grievous is not the story of a villain defeated by heroes. It is the story of a hero transformed into a villain, a protector twisted into a destroyer, a being who lost everything and spent his remaining years trying to fill the void through violence and vengeance. It is a tragedy in the oldest sense, a tale of potential destroyed and purposes corrupted. And it is a warning about the price of war, about what happens when conflicts grind on until they consume not just bodies, but souls. When the machinery of violence transforms even the most noble intentions into something unrecognizable. The wars end, the warriors fall, the legends persist, And on Kalee, they still pray to Grievous, remembering what he once was, never knowing what he became. Sleep well, knowing that even in the darkest corners of a galaxy far, far away, someone remembers the heroes before they became monsters. Close your eyes and rest as the mechanical wheeze of General Grievous fades into history, leaving only silence and the distant sound of waves on a Kaleesh beach, still searching for what was lost and can never be recovered.